Hello and welcome to From the BLN, the Burnley podcast. Well, the most pointless weekend of this particular part of the season, otherwise known as the international break, is over and we get back to proper football. This weekend with the Clarets taking on in-form Bristol City at Turf Moor. So numb am I after international breaks. I only realised today that we were playing at home at 3 o'clock on Saturday. Hopefully Paul Woodhouse in Cleveland and Darren Bentley in Lancashire are a little bit more on the ball, both with me tonight as we record this. I guess you two both knew we were playing this weekend and it was Bristol City at home, hopefully.
Kind of knew something was going on this weekend. I had to check 5 minutes before it was Bristol City at home, though. I thought it might have been away. But, not too far behind.
I'm missing it. Yeah. I'm actually missing it this weekend. I've got a player engagement that's forced me to miss the game. And my lad's missing the game too. And I think I'm more upset than he is. He's a bit like, it'll be a draw, Dad. I'm all right.
Yeah. I've worked out I miss Norwich and Sheffield United. Because I'm in Malta for one and away with the in-laws for the Sheffield United game. Now, putting it on ITV at 5:30 has actually helped me slightly, but there we go. We'll get on to Bristol City and the return of several Clarets, really, Naki Wells and Scott Twine amongst them, in a little bit. But let's just kind of try and get ourselves back in the game, get us limbs flexed and ready for this weekend a little bit. We mentioned the international break. A couple of things of note, of course. James Trafford called up to the England squad. Didn't play, of course, but a really good recognition, and Burnley must be probably the club who've provided the most England goalkeepers perhaps over the last decade or so. Perhaps a bit longer, the last 15 years with Tom Heaton, Nick Pope, and now James Trafford, albeit not yet made his debut. There was a goal for Lyle Foster. Although looking at the footage, it did look like he tried everything he could just to screw that wide across the face of goal, but that's obviously going to hopefully give Lyle a bit of a boost. And CJ Egan-Riley played twice, got an assist in the second game for the England 21s, although he was taken to the cleaners a couple of times by Wilson Odobert in the first game, a defeat for England. So plenty to talk about. Let's start with Lyle Foster, because we keep hoping that Lyle's going to rediscover his form, and a lot's been made of the amount of goals he scored compared to appearances. But Daz, I mean, it doesn't matter where you score or how you score, and it was a bit of a scruffy finish. I was joking, of course, about him conspiring to put it wide, but he does feel like a confidence player, doesn't he? And that will hopefully do him a bit of a world of good, won't it?
Any striker of note will tell you that anything that goes off your backside that gets you back on up and running is a start. And yeah, I mean, he did well just before the break, didn't he? Had that great game, then suddenly got dropped, bizarrely, for the next game. And that was a bit of a confusing one, because if he's going to go on a run after scoring goals, then throw him back in there. Yeah, he can't do him any harm at all, can it? And with the running, everybody's come back with a clean bill of health from the internationals, which is another good thing. It'd be interesting to see what his selection is at the weekend, because there's been a little bit of chopping and changing by Scott in recent weeks, but it really is getting to the risk stage now, isn't it? Where we talked about it for a few weeks. A defeat knocks you back, and it can be you're playing catch up for the rest of the season. So it's almost got to be that foot to the floor we've talked about now in every game, and that means picking your best 11. Whether he knows what his best 11 is, I'm not 100% sure. But a fit, raring Lyle Foster up front probably stays in that position. Everyone know I'm not his biggest fan. I do think Fleming brings to the table a little bit more. But Fleming's gone off the boil a little bit, I think, and therefore, between the two of them, because it is between the two of them, you've probably got to play Lyle Foster at the minute.
Yeah, and Woody, I mean, Jay Rodriguez scored during the international break for Wrexham. He missed a penalty, but scored the rebound. As Daz said, Fleming has come off the boil a little bit. We're in that almost horrible position where we've got neither of our chosen front men really pulling up trees. Now, I know, we've talked a lot about the Championship. There's very few true strikers in the Championship. I mean, obviously Josh Brownhill's kind of, in the higher echelons of the top goal scorer. But that selection is going to be interesting, because, the wide men, the two in-favour wide men, Marcus Edwards and Jadon Anthony, of course, haven't been on international duty. Both have, looking at kind of the club's social media, look to been enjoying, some pretty decent training sessions and getting, relationships built with their, fullbacks who mainly haven't gone away. you'd kind of perhaps back Lyle Foster in that almost traditional striker role if our wingmen have been working on, getting him service, which appears to be the kind of thing he's lacked quite a bit.
It has, yes. The only thing is, has he got a little bit of jet lag? Has it taken him out a little bit? Because it's a bit further to go over yonder than it is to pop around messing about with England, isn't it? So we'll see. If we had been pulling up any trees all season, we'd have been miles ahead, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
And so, yes, you would like to think that Lyle will come in. He's got a little bit of confidence. That's kind of 2 in 3 games now, isn't it? And yeah, a fit Lyle up top, firing on all cylinders, could be a nice little running for him. But then again, Fleming, I mean, he tends to be a little bit more, goes off a little bit, then scores a couple in 2, doesn't he? And then stops and starts. So we'll see. It's probably it's not the worst problem to have, but one of them's got to fire at some point.
Yeah, and a couple of other kind of notable international appearances. I think Manuel Benson started both of Angola's World Cup qualifiers, as did Hannibal. I mean, Benny's been feeling his way back in. Obviously came off the bench and scored a couple of games ago. But Daz, I mean, we talk about that key running, and we mentioned Aaron Ramsey back on the grass and obviously getting closer and closer. Benny going away to Angola and getting 2 fairly decent size appearances in is again going to help with that kind of impact off the bench stuff we're looking at, isn't it? Where we're looking for players to affect the game from the bench if Plan A is not going to plan.
Well, he went away with that goal from Sheffield Wednesday lodged in his brain, didn't he? That can't do him any harm whatsoever. The good thing, just going back to Foster a second, the great thing about this side at the minute is that everyone is chipping in. So we talked about not having that striker who's going to pull up trees and score 20 goals a season. But we have got a midfielder who's on course for scoring 15 to 16, and he's been well supplemented elsewhere. And Benson falls into that category, comes back and scores a worldie. Barnsley gets off the mark in the before the break. So we are chipping in from other areas, and that's going to be hugely important. I think, like Woody said, those 2 wide positions are cemented now for me for the rest.
Yeah.
Slider, and they're playing most of the games, aren't they?
Yeah.
So your back four is pretty settled. Your wingers are settled. There's that little fluctuation between those 3 midfielders of the holding 2 and who goes in the 10. But it's a pretty stable side now. And I know we said we don't think he knows what his best 11 is. I think that falls into that midfield category, the sort of 2 holding the 10 and the striker. Mm-hmm. Everything else is a pretty solid framework, which is odd because normally it's the spine of the side that is your strength.
Yeah.
Burnley, it's the width that's the strength at the minute, and the spine's a little bit unsure what the best route is. But yeah, go back to Manuel Benson, great for him. Great, these lads on international duty, it's great for them, isn't it? They'll come back healthy. It can only be good. It can only improve you as a player playing against better sides and better players. So I'm all for it. I know that we waited an awfully long time to get to internationals, didn't we? And now it feels like every time we get an international break, we have people flying off all over the world. Long may it continue.
Yeah, and I remember the days where it was the rule if you had 3 international players, your game was called off. It was only because I was looking at some of the lower league stuff, but you remember kind of like obviously Sean Gorter played for Bermuda, but you'd have like a couple of like 3rd-tier sides with
you did, didn't you?
This guy plays for St. Kitts and Nevis, this guy, they'd somehow got this ragtag of weird and wonderful kind of CONCACAF, Central American kind of internationals. But Daz is right. I mean, it's kind of, and James Trafford has mentioned this week, we'll come on to some comments from Trafford in a second, but, he mentions, look, for a goalkeeper to get called up from the Championship, albeit not play, it's a real kind of feather in the cap for what the coaching staff, as Trafford has rightly, praised, and this team has done, isn't it? It's that recognition. You perhaps might expect Angola to call up somebody of Benny's quality, or Hannibal obviously has played at Man United, so it's kind of a fixture in that side. But kind of, Egan Riley getting his first call up to the under-21s and Trafford being promoted to the senior squad by Thomas Tuchel in his first squad, it kind of shows that Burnley, despite being in the Championship, is still on the radar in terms of, we've got some pretty talented lads here.
Well, we must pop up as like a goalkeeper factory, irrespective of who we got as our, goalkeeping coach. We just keep churning him out or getting him in or whatever, which is quite astonishing, really. But I mean, I think it's a big statement to bring Trafford into the full squad setup for England, because it would have been extremely easy to throw him into the under-21s, wouldn't it? And he's going to be England's number one at some point. So you might as well get him integrated now, and it's a huge feather in his cap. But yeah, like you say, it's not just these funny little bit part players, who qualify through, the mother having their auntie's dog, at somebody's vet somewhere near Angola or whatever it is. It's a lot of legitimate quality players who are called up and playing vital roles for their international sides. And like you say, it's a very different it's different looking at that and stepping back a little bit and looking at it objectively from where we've been, a good 10, 20 years ago or so. And we're just riddled with internationals, aren't we?
Yeah, and one person who is going to be missing on Saturday, of course, is the manager, Scott Parker. He's got a 1-game ban for his sending off. We obviously got the CJ Egan-Riley sending off in the same game overturned. I mean, does the whole kind of FA disciplinary system feels kind of a little bit skewed a little with, Parker obviously not missing the immediate game because it was still being kind of, there was appeals going and things like that. But of course, Osmajic, the Preston North End player accused of making some sort of comment towards Hannibal, we're kind of 3-4 games on from that particular game, and he's still not, had an outcome one way or another. I mean, I know this has been a frustration for many years with people, but I mean, Scott Parker will feel a little bit aggrieved. I mean, he made the comments that he didn't think he was, in any way aggressive or, rude or whatever the kind of phrase in the FA used towards the referee. And it was certainly probably a lot more level-headed than I would have been given that referee's particular performance that night. But it feels really weird that we're in kind of the 2025 and we've still got these kind of fairly old-fashioned, you've got to go to Lancaster Gate or wherever it is now for a hearing and all of that carry on, don't you?
I think probably the racism charge is the one that sort of the charge itself is why that's lasting a little bit longer. And you've got to not forget Scott's accepted the charge.
Yeah.
So two wrongs don't make a right in that respect. I mean, Egan-Riley was overturned, quite rightly so. We'll never know what was said out there, but the fact that he's accepted the charge probably tells you all you need to know a little bit there. And we touched on this on the last one. I'm happy he's sat in the stands because he'll get a better view.
Yeah.
So I'm quite happy he's up there. They can oversee things from on high for a game or so, especially the home game when we're expected to win it. So Scott will take this punishment on the chin and he'll move on. But he doesn't seem the sort of guy who's going to F and blind at a referee, does he?
He doesn't, does he?
No.
He's more likely to talk about sartorial elegance with the referee, isn't he? One about his attributes. So
call him a scruffy oik,
yeah, he'll take it on the chin. It just means our set piece coach and Michael Jackson will be popping their heads out the dugout every 2 minutes, doesn't it?
Yeah, I do love the set piece coach coming to the corner of the pitch.
Like a meerkat, isn't it?
I mean, a little look-see and doing a few kind of finger actions and stuff like that. It's not quite Dyche's feed the chicken or anything like that, but feed the chickens. But I mean, that's a good point that Daz made there, Woody. Are you a fan of managers taking a more elevated view? I mean, I always think managers look like they quite enjoy being in a TV gantry, kind of, or on a little platform hanging from the roof of a stand. But do you, I guess in other sports, you look at rugby, they're, in certain other sports, they're kind of sat in boxes or sat in kind of exec suites and things. It does give a manager probably a little bit more of a little bit more perspective, doesn't it?
Better overview.
Yeah. But it's also one of those that somebody's got to give them a bollocking, haven't they? Somebody's got to do shouting running up and down a touchline and looking slightly aggravated. And I think it's, part and parcel of what a manager has to do. And he's obviously got a team around him that are looking at things, as in American football, where you've got your defensive coordinators and the team up looking at stuff, relaying things constantly down to the folks by the side, and then they just do the shouting and the bollocking, pretty much. And so it works its way out. It's not just all exclusively on one person to be able to understand everything that's going on. It's very much a team effort these days, isn't it? But he'll see a different perspective. So it'll be good for the boy.
Yeah.
He's not really one for being on the touchline and shouting and screaming anyway,
No, he
Scott,
isn't.
is he?
No.
You very rarely see that. So I don't quite know how. I suppose you need to be a player to know how much an influence he's actually having on that touchline. You know, it's tactical. Then you've got these headsets these days, everything's conveyed down to the bench, and if it's purely tactical, get in the stands, fair view, get him back at press box.
Yeah, that is, you know, the finest view in football, as like Henry Winter has said, and several others. I think Sam Matterface has also said, you know, and that's not necessarily what's happening on the pitch, but the rolling hills and the kind of terrace rows of Burnley Wood. I'm not quite sure they'd say the same if they were on the ground around there, but there we go. There we go. We've offended half of our listenership there. But yeah, I mean, Henrik Jensen obviously is the other coach who you barely see, but you know, you see him sometimes in kind of the training pictures. I saw him in Lidl in Padiham, and that's kind of the best sighting I've seen of him. He was like, my missus was like, who's that? I was like, oh yeah, it's I couldn't even remember his surname. I was like, Henrik Johansson, but again, you know, Jonathan Hill's another one we don't see much of. It's, you know, Elliot Tybo, I think he's called, the set piece coach, and Jacko, who you see more of. But one manager who does have a view, of course, as a bit of a segue, and it's a shame Chris isn't here to introduce it, because everyone knows how much Chris loves Sean Dyche. Dyche's been on Talk Sport. I think he's going to be a regular on Talk Sport. And he made some quite interesting comments. I'm just going to bring up the comments, and it's gone viral, obviously. 24 points, I think they got. It's been 127 million, and he got the Bayern job. Come on, I don't know how that works. I wish I was doing it. I wish I'd left the club 127 million quid in debt and then got the Bayern job. Anyway, there's an interesting twist of life. I mean, Daz, you've worked with Sean over quite a long period at Burnley, and you know the kind of person he is. And I think being in the press room, you get a kind of a feel for somebody, and it's interesting comments. It's very Talk Sport, isn't it? Very clippable, viral kind of stuff. What do you think the feeling is behind? Is it slightly tongue in cheek from Dicey to kind of diffuse the situation?
It is tongue in cheek from Sean. I mean, if you know him well, you know that. And Sean often uses his humour to make his point. I mean, it's a serious point, but he's making it with humour, I think, and a little nod and a wink. But it is he's got a point. I mean, he's been accused in some cases, I see, of being a little bit bitter. And I'm not sure he is, really. I mean, his legacy is completely assured at Burnley. You know, what he did at Burnley was unbelievable. And I say that, yes, I worked with him, but as a fan, not as a man who worked with him. You know, the guy should have a statue down there for what he's done, building the training ground, getting us into Europe, keeping us in the Premier League on a minuscule budget. And he's right. It's a case of Vincent Kompany falling upwards. Yeah. Failure suddenly gets him. All right, it might have been 10th choice for Bayern, but he's fallen upwards. And one thing you think about Sean, he was never going to get that budget, was he, at Burnley? You know, his reputation was built on solid, established players, predominantly British, bringing him in, moulding him into a team, and making him run through brick walls for you. And in that sense, he was never going to get the budget that Kompany got. But equally, you couldn't then bring Kompany in and give him the budget Dyche had, because Kompany wouldn't accept that. So each manager on their merits, you know. I mean, Sean, as I say, his legacy is completely assured at Burnley, but he's making a point. There's definitely no doubt about that. And as for him being on TalkSport, I mean, he's had a little break now. He's out of the game for a little while since he left Everton. But a man has to work, doesn't he? And he's a football manager at the end of the day. He's not a layabout. He wants to get back into work, and there's no better way than being in work than getting your face out there. You might remember he did that when he left Watford. He was on Sky Sports quite a lot when he left Watford before he came to Burnley. So it's not unknown for him to do that. And he's a very, very popular media presence because he's always got an opinion on something, hasn't he, Sean? So it's no surprise to see him popping up on all these little podcasts with Gary Lineker and Talksport, and we'll probably see a little bit more of him. I think you said he's got a contract with Talksport now, isn't he, going forward? So
Yeah, I think he's got the
it'll
next
be
few
interesting
Sundays.
sound bites. Yeah, there'll be interesting sound bites coming through for weeks now, until he run out of stuff to talk about with Burnley, and then it'll be moved on to Everton then, won't it?
Yeah, he's got plenty of material, shall we say, Woody? But I mean, I think we call it a bit of a beauty parade. My mate Damien always calls it the Big Fat Sam Beauty Parade, where you're out of work for a bit and you kind of think, well, I wouldn't mind getting back in. I'm sure Dyche doesn't need the money, given the fact that he got a new 4-year contract just before Alan Pace potted him, which was one of Pace's kind of more bizarre early moves, shall we say. The awarding of the contract, I should say, rather than the potting, because I think Dyche was always on a kind of rolling contract to make sure that the club wasn't ever in a position where they owed, him a massive payoff should they wish to get rid of him, which, quite noble. But what do you make of it? I mean, Dyche is good value into, I think, as Dad said, when he started appearing on podcasts, which he did after he left Burnley, after a bit of a break. It's kind of part of fan culture now, isn't it, to get these characters on, it's a big coup for Talksport to get someone like him who's, fresh out of the game. What do you make of his appearances? Do you see a bitterness, or are you a bit like me and Darren, kind of like, you know what, I don't think there's much bitterness there?
It's hardly controversial, is it? I mean, the only controversial bit is arguably him actually saying it. That's the thing, isn't it? It's not somebody else saying it on his behalf. How many times have we either said it directly or alluded to it?
We're all thinking it, aren't we?
Exactly.
We're all thinking it. He said it.
Pretty common knowledge, and he said it, and he's had the honesty and decency to say it, albeit because he's getting himself on Talksport. I think he could have been infinitely more controversial, arguably. So I think he may have even held back a little bit. No, I don't see it as controversial at all.
Yeah, maybe he's saving some of that stuff for later on. I think he's also, I think, on the Gary Lineker one, talked about bringing in kind of turnover of £1 billion in terms of in his 10 years, which again is has been picked apart, and people want to see the figures and things. But arguably signing a free transfer like Tom Eaton and developing them as players, and bringing a player for 2 million and selling him for 25, it all adds up, etc. But I think there's also comments from him talking about how he felt the kind of Pace way of doing transfer business, he was starting to kind of quite like that. I mean, obviously Pace went out and bought him a couple of toys to play with in terms of Weghorst and Cornet, I think. But it's kind of, Daz, from a manager's point of view, that tap got turned off, didn't it, completely, regardless of the kind of constraints he was working on. I mean, the former chairman pretty much turned off any kind of investment for Dyche, and we kind of had a pretty solid squad with very few incomings for quite a while, didn't we, until the takeover?
Yeah, clearly the relationship between Sean and Mike fell down considerably in those later months. There's no secret there, is there? I'm not privy to what went on behind the scenes, but it was clear to anybody that relationship soured. And Mike, as the chairman, was clearly in a position where he was trying to sell a football club and leave it in the best possible state as well. So, look, it's water under the bridge, isn't it? We can't go backwards. We can only go forwards. You can't look back and reflect on things like that. You've just got to move forwards. What the current owners have at the minute is a situation where they're borrowing against future earnings. We can see that, and there's a gamble involved in that, because you've got to stay in the Premier League or get back into the Premier League. You don't, that money tap can soon be turned off, and you end up selling your assets, and you end up, like a lot of clubs have, not finding their way back into the Premier League, and perhaps even falling further down the ladder. So it's important that Burnley get back into the Premier League, I think, and become that sort of West Brom of past years, that yo-yo club that they were at one stage, bouncing in and out of the Premier League. I think that's the best Burnley can hope for. I don't think Burnley can hope to be an established Premier League club unless just some huge, major investment comes in. But who knows, what the future holds. Wrexham were on their arse 10 years ago, weren't they? And now suddenly they're looking at Championship and beyond. So nothing's impossible.
Yeah, definitely. talking of the quest for Premier League football, Woody, Bristol City in town. These links are getting better, aren't they?
They're absolutely astonishing.
It's like I've done this before, isn't it? Incredible.
Yeah. Where's he going now?
That's why you were in the big books. That's why you were in the big books, Andrew.
That's it, mate. I wish. Yeah, where were we? Bristol City. There we go. Look at that. That's it. Bristol City in town, second in the form table to the Clarets in the Championship. They've kind of snuck up on me a little bit. I don't just mean in terms of when the game is. There's a couple of sides that perhaps just stealthily have got in there. I mean, Frank Lampard's Coventry are the main ones who have just skyrocketed themselves into contention in the top six, whilst other teams, including our friends down the road, have dropped like stones and fallen out of that top six. I mean, there's no easy games between now and the end of the season, but this is a real test, isn't it? Two clubs, two teams in good form. A couple of old faces coming back, as we mentioned. What kind of affair do you kind of expect? Are you expecting 0-0 like Daz's lad, or are you kind of thinking, you know what, it is that take a risk time of the season, and Bristol City will be wanting to get 3 points, we'll be wanting to get 3 points. What we expecting? Well,
considering out of the last 5, they've won 1, drawn 4 away from home, I think I'll go with Daz's lad on a, It's one of those. It's a difficult one, isn't it? You're coming back after a 2-week break. Both sides have probably found a little bit of momentum, and then what happens? I don't think Bristol City are going to come all guns a blazing, but apparently they've hit the woodwork 14 times this season so far.
Wow.
So yeah, Lord only knows. But we've still got to put them away. We've got to do, it's shit a bus time, isn't it? Really. So we got to keep pressing. We've got to be looking for a win. There's no two ways about it. They can come for a draw. They can come for whatever they want. Let's not worry about them.
I think they'll come at us. I think they'll come at us. They have to come at us because of the position they're in. They're in form. They're running out of games. They're probably challenging Coventry, West Brom, maybe Middlesbrough, for that 6th spot. And they'll know that they need to keep winning games because there's enough sides around them that will take that 6th spot. So I fully expect them to come at us, which I think is a good thing from a Burnley point of view. What we don't want, what we hate to see at Burnley, is a side sitting in and us just throwing it across the midfield from left to right and back again and back to Egan Riley and a long diag that goes out of play, and then we're back to square one again. We want a side that comes at us and gives Jaden Anthony and gives Marcus Edwards a little bit of a space on the wings. So bring it on for me. I think the more sides that come at us, and a few of them will in the last few weeks. Sheffield will, Norwich will have to because they're running out of games. So yeah, I think it's got the makings of a, dare I say it, an end-to-end game.
Oh, that's the curse there, isn't it?
That's one end of the box to the other end of the box, by the way. Also.
Yeah. End to end, one end of the back four to the other end of the back four. For a little bit of Trafford thrown in just for good measure. We did say we were going to mention Trafford. I mean, Trafford's done an interview. I think he must have been the player who they put forward for the press today, but I think he spoke to Radio Lancashire and said that he's convinced he'll be in the Premier League next season. I mean, Woody, we've made quite a bit of his clean sheet record and his development, which has been fantastic. You said he will definitely be England's #1 goalkeeper soon enough, which again, he's probably cursed him there, but...
Yes.
I mean, he does go on to talk about how, the main priority for Burnley was to get promoted automatically. It's still the priority. I mean, we don't expect James Trafford to be with the club in the summer if we're in the Championship. Even if we get promoted, do you see James Trafford lining up first game of the season, probably home or away to Man City? Well, maybe a former Scott Parker club, Spurs, maybe. Or do you think that, we've got him for this last run of games, this last, whatever it is, number of games, 10 games, 8 games, and that's it? We should cherish having seen Trafford's development this season.
I think it'll be it. I think. I'd love it not to be. The romantic in me. I'd love to see him in a Burnley yellow, whatever day glow form of shirt he'll be wearing. But I think he'll be off to pasture slightly bigger, better, and greener at some point. and I think it'll probably be this summer. So, and best of luck to him. Best of luck to him. I'd love to see him stick around a little bit longer, but he's a damn fine keeper, and he's only going to get better.
After all the slagging off you did last season as well.
I know, exactly.
That's probably why he's going to Newcastle. But I mean, it does raise a question, Daz, doesn't it? I mean, I think it's probably clear that the other goalkeepers we've got on the books are probably not at championship level. I know Vladimir, or however you pronounce it, got promoted with Ipswich, but I mean his showings in more recent cup games haven't quite been there. It could end up being a summer of rebuilding. I saw a tweet the other day that said West Ham are tracking Trafford, Humphreys, Esteve and Egan Riley. I mean, you're going to get, relatively, I mean, Egan Riley out of contract, of course, but, that's quite a big payday. But for all the talk of let's get promoted automatic, that comes with its own issues, doesn't it? Because, if we don't get promoted, those players leave, you fishing in one pool. If we do get promoted and those players still leave because they're all destined for bigger and better things, it becomes a real task for Scott Parker, doesn't it?
'Twas ever thus as a Burnley fan, wasn't it?
Yeah.
We've never been a club that's been able to hold on to our better players. And few players, going back to Trafford for a second, few players have had a redemption arc like James Trafford, by the way. I mean, I'm one of those who was screaming at him from the Jimmy Mack stand and calling for Muric to be brought in. But and it's a funny one because this season he's been great. Don't get me wrong, he's been great, but he's been very, very well protected.
Yeah,
and underutilized a lot. A lot of what we see of James Trafford is picking the ball up and playing it out and calmly playing it out, which he wasn't terribly doing well last year. So. Yeah, it's a fun one. That back five, though. I mean, it's funny. That back five are definitely drawing attention because of the records, aren't they? Yeah. The record speaks for itself. And if you're looking for defenders in this game, you're looking at players who you can pick up for a penny, so to speak.
Yeah.
Championship's a great hunting ground for people like that, isn't it? But if you're a Premier League club, you can pick up a bargain in the Championship, and you've got Egan Riley, you've got Esteve, Roberts to a lesser extent because of his age. But I say Trafford will go in the summer. I don't think he will stay, but let's have Nick Pope back for one last hurrah. Yeah. Let's do a job swap. I know he's 30. What's Pope now? 32, 33 probably. Yeah. But Tom Eaton was getting on that, and Nick Pope was a superb goalkeeper for us.
And he's still a superb Premier League goalkeeper, isn't he?
That's and he won't be number two, by the way. If Trafford goes up there, Trafford won't want to be number two, and Pope won't want to be number two. No. And then they've got the other guy at Newcastle whose name escapes me.
Dubravka.
Yeah.
Who's played a lot of games in Pope's absence, so they're going to have a real sort of embarrassment of riches up there. So let's get Popey back for one last hurrah, and let's get Tom back as well as number two. But Tom's still knocking about, isn't he?
He's still knocking about, yeah.
I still see him on post match cheering when he's clapping to the crowd when they're doing the lap of honour or lap of shame, whatever it is, Man United these days.
The only time I ever see Tom Eaton's in a Man United club suit going to a funeral at Manchester Cathedral. It's he always seems to arrive with Bruno Fernandes. There's been a couple of obviously recent deaths within the United camps with tea ladies and things like that, and stalwarts of the club.
Receptionist. Don't do it down.
Sorry, receptionist.
Tea lady.
Well, something like that. But yeah, I just see Tom Eaton turning up in a Man United suit and trainers, but there we go. Let's leave it there. We will be back on Monday with a debrief of this classic encounter that you've both predicted. The classic encounter 0-0. We might as well just stay on and record that now. But there we go. Sheffield United play tonight if you're listening on Friday, so perhaps puts them under a little bit of pressure, but will at least give us a bit of an indicator of perhaps where we're going to be up to there at home to Coventry City. So that's again no easy games in the Championship. Leeds United play Swansea at home. Swansea not too much in form, but again, no easy games. So by 4:45 on Saturday tomorrow, hopefully we'll have a bit of a clearer picture of how the Championship top three, because it is a top three. I mean, I think Sunderland are 11 points behind the Clarets, and then I think you got another big jump back to them. So
we're going to get that, Scott, by the way, in the last 7 or 8 games, because of the TV schedule, you're not going to get the three of them playing simultaneously many times.
No.
So it's always going to be someone looking to try and get the edge and put the pressure on the others.
There's only that last game of the season that's guaranteed, isn't it? Because they all kick off at the same time. But I think it's an interesting dynamic psychologically. I think we perhaps feel it more as fans than perhaps players do if they're, doing that one game at a time mentality. But certainly, Frank Lampard will want to go to Sheffield United and kind of show what his Coventry side are about. So enjoy that tonight if you're watching it. Enjoy Burnley versus Bristol City, wherever you're keeping abreast of that, whether you're in the States like Woody or at a prior engagement like Daz, or trying to remember to turn up at 3 o'clock like I will be doing on Saturday. We will be back on Monday with a debrief. Until then, enjoy the rest of your week and up the Clarets.
How many times do I have to tell you? Stop moaning!
Not going anywhere. I've never been happier, only to wake up in a whole different world.